Hey friends, it's time to shell some beans. I've been growing my garden all season long, but now it is October and the weather is drying out and the garden is winding down. But that means I get to pick all my beans, and I'm going to show you the simplest, quickest way that you can shell your dried beans. So let's dig in. Now you can pick your beans while they're still fresh, and I already picked beans a couple of times to have fresh beans. But because it was really dry throughout the month of September and it's hardly rained at all during the month of October so far, I just let my beans dry right on the plant. And then I can pick them all, and it makes shelling them super easy. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now normally, I like to shell my beans using a DIY bean sheller that I made using an electric drill and an attachment that goes inside it. And the attachment goes in the drill and you stick it in the hole in this 5-gallon bucket. Put all your beans inside, and then that attachment is like a flail that flails around inside the bucket. Works really well, and unfortunately I have misplaced my attachment. It's in my garage somewhere, but I've looked and I can't find it. So I'm gonna have to do this by hand, but that's okay. It's not that much harder to do it by hand. And I wanted to show you this in the video today because not everybody has a drill and not everybody has that attachment. I'll leave a link in the description to a video that shows you how to make your own DIY bean sheller using an electric drill. Super easy and useful. But today, I'm going to show you how you can do the same thing by hand without any power tools at all. All you need is a couple of 5-gallon buckets, and it's super easy. I've got several different types of beans today, and I have them all bagged up in these plastic shopping bags to keep them separate so they don't get mixed up. But I've got some Ford Hook Lima beans, I have some California black-eyed peas, some zipper cream peas, some pinto beans, and I'm gonna shell them all by hand. Now, in order to do this, you need your beans to be dry. They have to be dried out so that the shell, the husk, is easy to crack, okay? And once you've got that, now if they're not all dry, you can take the ones that may still be green and you can set them aside and dry them out using a fan. It'll take maybe a week or two for them to finish drying out, but you want them to be nice and dry and crispy. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to take your beans and you're just going to drop them in a 5-gallon bucket. You don't want it to be too full, but maybe about a quarter to a third full. First thing I like to do is take a hammer. It doesn't have to be a hammer, but just anything that you can use to sort of pound on the beans. And we're just gonna sort of pound on those beans. We're gonna get the help start getting the hulls to break up. What this is doing, you see, is just making the shells pop open and drop out the beans that are inside. Now, once you've gotten them started like that, I usually just take my hands and mash them, okay? And there again, this is where you might want to wear a pair of gloves. If you have sensitive skin, or if the hulls of those beans you find that it's hurting your hands or scratching you or poking in you, then put on a pair of gloves and do it. Now, you'll notice if you have any beans in there like this that are not completely dry, it's not going to work very well. So you want to set these aside and let them dry before you do it. So if you find any there like that, just take them out, set them aside. Now that we have it all pretty much separated, how are we going to separate out the dried beans from all of the chaff, these dried hulls? Well, we're going to use a simple technique that people have been using for thousands of years called winnowing. And in winnowing, what we do is we use the wind to blow away the lighter chaff, leaving behind the heavier dried beans. So as you can see, I could just simply blow on this and you get the idea. We're blowing away the lighter chaff, leaving behind the beans. Now today's a pretty windy day. Here you can see, maybe you can see the leaves that are falling from the trees. The flag is blowing. If we have a really windy day, we can actually do this just by using the wind that is blowing around us. But since we live in the modern world, we have electric fans that can provide a steady stream of wind that's very predictable, and that's going to be even better. So what I'm going to use is a box fan. Now we're going to take one bucket that's empty and we're going to put it on the ground. We're going to put a box fan here and then we're going to put this on the ground. Now we're going to take our other bucket that's full of beans and dried hulls, and we're going to slowly and carefully just pour that over the fan that is blowing. And you're going to see how it blows away the chaff, but the heavier beans are going to drop down into the bucket. Now you can see we have cleared out a lot of the chaff, and mostly we have beans now. All of the chaff has blown onto the ground. We do have still some chaff in here, and we also have some of these beans that see are green. They're not completely dry. So we can just take those out and set those aside, or we can shell those by hand. I'm just going to take them out and set them aside. Now you might also see in here that we have some that have been a little bit stubborn and haven't completely shelled themselves. So now that we have, it's a little bit easier to see what's going on inside here, we can just take our hands and we can shell these even more. Try to get all those beans out. Now we're going to pour these beans again and just clear out even more of that chaff. Now we're almost completely clean beans. We still have a few little things in there like this. We can just clean that up by hand. And this is going to clear out 95% of our shells and everything. And we're not going to, you might lose a few beans, but you're not going to lose more than 5% or less of your beans. Almost see that? Isn't that great? And here on the ground is all our chaff. And you might find 1 or 2 beans in here, but not really, not hardly any. You might notice some of these beans in here, you see that? That bean is not completely dry. It's still a little bit moist. And you can tell as you're looking down in there, you see some of those beans kind of have a light green color to them. Those beans are not completely dry. You don't want to store these beans until they are completely dry. This bean is completely dry. This bean still has moisture in it. You want them to all be like this one, completely dry. Otherwise, you'll get mold. If you get these beans completely dry, they will store for years. Is just to spread them out on a baking sheet. This allows air to circulate around and will allow these beans to dry. And then maybe once a day, you just come in and sort of shake them around, stir them up. Make sure that the air is getting all the way around the beans. And leave them for about a week. You could also dry these beans in a dehydrator. You could even do it in your oven. But I find that it's just easiest just to let them sit for about a week to completely dry. In Matthew 6:25 through 27, it says, "That is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food and drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? Look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you far more valuable to Him than they are? Can all your worries add a single moment to your life?" Jesus said these words to remind us we don't have to worry. If we are trusting in the Lord and if we're doing what we're supposed to do, the Lord is going to take care of us. There's no sense in spending your life worrying and being full of anxiety. That doesn't do any good at all. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to plan and we don't need to take care for life. Jesus wasn't telling us just to be lazy and sit back and let God do all the work. We have to do our part too. And the Bible is full of stories that tell us to be sure to be prudent and wise and to plan ahead. In Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 8, it even tells us to take a look at the ants and learn a lesson in wisdom from them. Take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bones. Learn from their ways and become wise. Though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer, gather food for the winter. And you know, ants are just simple creatures, and yet God takes care of them. And God takes care of the birds. But those animals, it's not like they don't do anything. They have work to do too. They search for their food, they store it up for the winter, they have their part to do, and they do it. But God takes care of them. And we also have our part to do as well. We don't have to worry about things. God is going to take care of us. He's going to provide all of the things and all of the tools and all the resources that we need. But that doesn't mean we can just sit back and be lazy. We need to do our part as well. Just like with these beans, we can grow them in the garden, and then we can harvest them, and then we can even store them up for the winter. And beans are a wonderful food to do that. They're full of nutrition and protein. They are a great food that you can survive on throughout the winter, and they will store for a long time if you do the work to take care of it. Make sure that it's laid up for when you need it. So, don't be full of anxiety and don't worry about things, and don't spend all of your time thinking about, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to get by? God is going to provide. You do your part and you trust in the Lord. And then let's get out there and let's grow and be fruitful.